Hey guys, it's Ryan. This video we're going to be talking about an intro to bone growth in preparation for the National Board Exam Part 2 and the ADAT Ortho sections. So let's dive in here and first talk about the theories of growth control. So none of these theories explains the entirety of craniofacial growth, so it's sort of a mix of these three. The first one is direct genetic control, and that's the theory that bone is directly under the control of genetics. So it's pretty straightforward, direct genetic control. The second one is epigenetic growth control, so that's referring to something outside of genetics, some non-genetic component. And specifically, the theory is saying that cartilage is the primary determinant of growth, and bone then replaces that cartilage. Now, the third theory of growth is the environmental growth control theory, or the functional matrix theory, and it says that soft tissues exert forces on bone that stimulate their growth. So, for example, if part of your face is growing in a certain direction, during your growth spurt, it's exerting forces on the underlying bone and pulling or pushing it in a certain direction. So as far as actual bone formation, there are really two methods of bone formation. It's either one or the other. So if we dissect out the name endochondral, in terms of endochondral ossification, it literally means within cartilage. So bone formation from within cartilage. And so the bone develops from a pre-existing cartilage model, and this model literally is shaped in a way that when the bone replaces it, it's in that same shape that the bone is supposed to be in. So if it's a long bone, then that cartilage model will be the shape of a long bone. And this method of bone formation is under more direct genetic control. So if we're talking about our theories of growth control, it's that first one that it has to do with the endochondral ossification. And it describes the cranial base, how the cranial base grows, and how most bones of the body, the femur and the humerus, they all grow by endochondral ossification. And the other one is intramembranous, which literally means within the membrane. And so the bone develops from the mesenchyme, or the fibrous connective tissue. So it's referring to the periosteum of a bone or the endosteum of a bone. And so it involves mesenchymal cells in those fibrous connective tissue layers that differentiate into osteoprogenitor cells that then differentiate into osteoblasts that actually form the bone. And this method of bone formation is influenced more by environmental forces, so that, again, that functional matrix theory, and the cranial vault, maxilla, and mandible, mostly the mandible, it's also formed a little bit by endochondral ossification, are formed by intramembranous ossification. And I'm going to have videos on all four of these cranium components, so we can talk more about that in other videos. So I wanted to discuss about endochondral ossification just because it's a little bit more complex and it comes up a lot. So I rigged up this drawing here. It's very simple. You can replicate it in a couple of seconds, I'm sure. And there are basically 5 zones of endochondral ossification. And this is, if you can imagine, an epiphyseal growth plate that's growing in the downward direction. So the first zone is the resting, or sometimes called the reserve zone. And that's where chondrocytes are just chilling out. They're not doing anything. The next one is the zone of proliferation, where we have some growing happening, and chondrocytes are dividing and arranged in columns that parallel the direction of growth. Now, the next zone is hypertrophy, or the zone of maturation, and that's where the chondrocytes are getting larger. The next one is the zone of calcification, sometimes called the zone of degeneration, and this is where those enlarged chondrocytes die, and they leave cavities, and then the matrix that surrounded these cells is calcified with calcium ion and phosphate ions. And then we finally get bone formation in this last zone of ossification, and the cavities that were left were invaded by blood vessels, and those blood vessels brought in a bunch of bone cells. So we had osteoblasts and osteoclasts, osteoprogenitor cells, and all those things. And the osteoclasts digest the calcified cartilage from the last zone, and the osteoblasts then replace that with actual bone. And then I wanted to throw out these two terms. This is completely separate from the methods of bone formation, the endochondral and intramembranous. These terms more refer to how bone is formed. So interstitial, think an increase in length. So a humerus is getting longer at its epiphyseal plates because it's growing in sort of an epiphyseal growth plate is growing in one direction, so it's increasing the length of a bone. We'll talk more about synchondroses, which are basically two-sided epiphyseal plates, in the next videos on the specifics of craniofacial bone growth. And then appositional growth refers to an increase in width or thickness or diameter. And this mainly occurs at the surfaces of bones and at sutures between, say, bones of the cranial vault. So that's all I have for this video. Stay tuned for the next couple videos of bone growth. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.